Hey, welcome back to the MC, the Media Committee for the Democratic Central Committee of Shasta County. My name is Ed McCarthy. I'm your host. We are now continuing our conversation with Audrey Denney, our candidate for Congressional District 1 to represent the North State in the House of Representatives. Welcome back.
That's me. Here I am. I'm back. Welcome.
Yes. We left off talking a little bit about the federal response programs and things like that. And you did mention healthcare. This crisis really does show how our healthcare system, at least the private side of it, is not working particularly well, right? So say you were one of those folks who just lost their job and you had employer provided healthcare like I do, like my family does. I just filed my taxes, and on my tax form, there's this little box, DD on the W-2, and it tells you how much your employer paid for your healthcare for the year. So for me, my family, it was $21,759, right? So if I lost my job today, if I was laid off like so many people are, not only would I now have no income other than unemployment and the other programs that are out there, now by far my biggest expense, more than rent, more than food, more than anything, is healthcare. Yeah. At a time when I am least able to afford it. I am looking at an additional $1,800 when I'm unemployed and there is a pandemic out there where if me or one of my family members get sick, we could easily run up hundreds of thousands of dollars of bills in a private healthcare facility. That seems like a problem.
This is one of my favorite things to talk about because I have always been campaigning on two issues. One is our economic and environmental health by getting our forests back into an ecological health, state of ecological health, right? That'll provide jobs, provide ecosystem services, mitigate climate change. Like number one, forest health. Number two, people health. Our healthcare system is broken. And this, if anything, this crisis has demonstrated that it's broken, right? Before this all started, 2/3 of American bankruptcies were medical in nature, right? Almost every single one of us, regardless of our health insurance status, is one medical crisis away from being bankrupt. And it's because our healthcare system isn't designed to provide affordable, quality, patient-centered care, right? Our healthcare system is designed to provide profits to insurance companies and drug companies, right? I think what everyone agrees on is that it doesn't matter who you are. When you're sick, you should get to go to a doctor, right? It shouldn't cost an arm and a leg, and everyone should get the same quality of care. And I think almost everyone, except people who work for insurance companies, likely the CEOs of insurance companies, but everyone else says the money should be going to the providers and the facilities. We shouldn't be having to spend this much money, this much of it going to insurance companies. And so fixing the broken healthcare system in the United States is not something that I'm going to be able to do single-handedly as a freshman rep from California's 1st District, right? But I will be working with members, hopefully, across the aisle to move forward, to move closer, to advance on what we have. But my main focus, what I actually think that I can get done as a freshman rep from California's 1st District, is really honing in and focusing in on rural healthcare. So our district, right, vast, almost the size of South Carolina. There are 10 states in this nation that are smaller than our district. It makes up all or part of 11 counties, right? It's this huge, huge, beautiful piece of land that we all love. But the access, the actual physical access to healthcare is so limited. I mean, we have in Modoc County and in Sierra County, there aren't actual hospital facilities where women can deliver a baby because there aren't those facilities in Sierra County, and in Modoc County at the hospital, they can't afford to keep an anesthesiologist on staff all the time, which is what you need if you're gonna deliver babies, right? So women are having to drive for hours and hours, usually out of state. In those counties, are either going to Oregon or they're going to Nevada to deliver babies, right? We were up in Susanville, my campaign manager and I, and my campaign manager, he's got 3 teenage kids, and he's chatting with somebody. Oh yeah, I was actually just down in Chico last week. And Brian was like, oh, what were you doing down there? And he's like, well, I was, we're seeing the pediatrician. And Brian was like, who's your pediatrician? And they have the same pediatrician because there aren't any in Susanville, right? So this is the landscape that we're working in right now.
how does your faith fit into your beliefs with healthcare? How do those fit together? And I would also love to hear what your solutions are for fixing the rural healthcare problem.
So the core, like my core belief that my faith has shaped in me is that all humans are inherently equal in worth and rights and dignity. And so I grew up Episcopalian. That's still the faith community that I'm part of. And like from a faith lens, like that looks like I believe everyone's equal and everyone's worthy because we're all beautiful children of God, right? But you can also look at that in a secular context, from a human rights context, and you can say, hey, in a human rights lens, we're all equal because we exist, right? Just by the nature of us being humans, just by the nature of us existing, we are all inherently equal. There's nothing we can do to be better than someone else, or to be more worthy than someone else, or have more rights than someone else. And so under that context, right, it should be no surprise that I believe that everyone should have healthcare, right? And everyone across the world should have healthcare, but specifically in our context, everyone in this country should have affordable quality care. And this same quality of care, what really, really, really breaks my heart when we're talking about healthcare in America today is that so many factors determine the quality of care that you get, right? People every day in this country are dying as they wait to get seen. This kind of inequity, this injustice, I experienced firsthand on my first campaign. In August of 2018, I was diagnosed with an ovarian tumor. It was about the size of a football. It was terrifying, right? The doctors looked at it and they're like, this looks like stage 4 ovarian cancer. But from the moment that my primary care doctor put her hand on my belly and found it, to the moment that I was under the knife getting that tumor removed, was 9 days. And I was seen by the leading gynecological oncologist in the Western United States, right? And I got that treatment because I knew somebody who knew somebody, right? Somebody's friend, a friend of a friend, was an oncologist in Oregon, and they said, hey, my friend's got to get in there. She's really sick. We got to get her back on the campaign trail. And so I got seen in 9 days because I am connected and because I'm a person of privilege, right? My other option, because there's not a gynecological oncologist in California's 1st District, was to call UC Davis and try to get seen down there. I mean, it was going to be 8 weeks to even have an evaluation down there. And this thing was growing every day and would have likely burst inside of me and killed me on the campaign trail if I hadn't gotten seen that quickly. And so while I am so grateful, A, to be alive, and B, to have had the incredible healthcare experience I had, it is an injustice that I got better healthcare because I'm connected and a person of privilege. That is an injustice to me, and that is deeply steeped in my faith background. And so, everyone being covered, everyone having quality care at an affordable price, and everyone having the same access are all things that are really guided by my faith belief. So,
yeah,
thanks for asking. That's a great question.
Sure. Yeah. So, how much better care would those systems provide if the 28,000 that I'm in some ways wasting every year on our inefficient, very expensive private healthcare system was funneled into the system that was actually providing care? You know, streamlining that could save so much money. Yeah. I could pay the same, and ultimately most people could get a lot better care. So tell me some of your ideas of how can we fix the system and get better healthcare in the North State?
Absolutely. And Ed, and what you're driving at there really is the concept of a single payer system, right? And there's no perfect example out there, I don't think yet, of a single payer system. There's a lot of things we can learn and takeaways that we can take from different countries' healthcare systems that are operating under a single payer system. But when we can cut out the profits to the insurance companies, because you're giving your $28,000 a year to the insurance companies, and part of that money is spent on the department that's continuing to deny your conditions, right? Like that's like there's entire departments that are working to make sure that I can't get the prescriptions that I need because they're more expensive, right? And then we have to reapply. And if we had a system where that was truly centered around the patients, right, where healthcare providers could prescribe and treat the patients for what they have, we're getting so much closer. So I absolutely think that we need to be working towards a single payer system. honestly, I think it's going to take us a long time to get there. It's restructuring 1/6 of the American economy. And we all know how functional our leaders in Washington, D.C. are right now. So I see that transition taking a long time. I think the first thing that we need to do is making sure that we're stabilizing the insurance markets and building off the good things that came out of the Affordable Care Act. Like, there's a lot of good that came out of the Affordable Care Act, right? There are the 10 things that are now essential that all healthcare plans have to cover, right? What's been going on is the Republican leadership in Washington, D.C. has been trying to systematically dismantle it, right? And systematically destabilize the insurance markets. So every single year, our insurance prices are going up and up and up and up, sometimes by 10%, sometimes by 20%. 3 years ago, like, I just did the math. Right now, my company that I work for pays $700 a month for my health care. And it's it's a decent plan, but I'm a single woman living alone, and that's just for me. My cats aren't even covered, for crying out loud. But 3 years ago, they were only paying $500 a month for me, right? And so we're seeing every year our business manager is like, well, here's what we're looking at this year. I priced out everything. And so the first thing that we need to do is making sure that we have more options for people to choose from, which will increase competition and decrease prices. Because when you go on to Covered California and there's only one option, obviously they can charge whatever they want. So that's my vision of likely where I'd like to see us going, but really focusing back in on what we can do here, supporting our federally qualified healthcare centers around the district that are the clinics in our local rural areas that are federally funded, either completely or partially, is absolutely crucial. But one of the really big things that we struggle with up here is just a lack of healthcare service providers. Like, almost the entire district is what they call a medically underserved area, which means that there just aren't enough healthcare service providers. And so there are a couple federal programs.
Just to clarify that, a healthcare service provider, is that like a doctor?
Like a doctor, nurse,
Gotcha.
GP, NP,
So there's just not enough of those. Shasta County, we're probably good, but other areas, not so much.
Yeah, and it's still probably on specialists. You're probably still struggling to get into a specialist in a timely manner, but I keep using Susanville. I swear I go to other places besides Susanville. But in Susanville, there's a program called the National Health Service Corps, which gives student loan repayments to doctors and nurses and other healthcare workers that come and serve in a medically underserved area for a certain number of years. But the funding for that program has been systematically cut, right? And so at this point, Susanville used to have 3 folks working under that program as GPs up there, and now they're down to 1, right? And so that's the doctor for all of Lassen County. And that's not okay, right? So what can I do as a freshman rep? Well, I can build alliances with representatives from other rural vast districts, whether they're Republicans or Democrats, and say, hey, like, let's make sure that we boost funding to this specific program so people in our district can get more access to service providers. And
so if I understand that right, that's a loan repayment program. So people are going to medical school, they're getting $100,000 debt. So if they came to Susanville, or if they came to Weed, or they came to Dunsmuir or whatever, and they were practicing medicine in one of those smaller areas, this would help pay back more of their loans. So
and it's either a 5 or a 10-year thing, and it pays back some of their loans. And
okay, so instead of our local economy paying it off, their student loans would just be forgiven, and that would be a way to sort of subsidize their income in a way to help encourage them to come up here, rather than to go to an area like the Bay Area where they have higher rates because they have a lot higher revenue bases. Exactly.
And so that's like, for me, I like to think of, I'm really pragmatic. I'm not sure if you're picking that up about me. I'm a solutions oriented person, and I want to find solutions that get outcomes and that get results. And so for me, this is a short to medium term solution, right? Is how do we attract people here now to serve the immediate need? But when we start thinking out longer and we think about what's a long-term solution to this chronic shortage of healthcare professionals, it actually starts all the way back in our rural schools, right? Because the people who want to live here are the people who grew up here, who have community ties here. Like, folks who want to live in Alturas are people who grew up in Alturas, who love it there, who have community there, right? The people who live in Sierraville are the people who grew up there, who have community there, who love that lifestyle, right? And so in order to, we're experiencing, what they call a brain drain in all of our vast rural counties, where young people get through high school, they grow up, if we ever do, go off to college, and they don't come back, right? And so we're seeing an increasingly aging population. So we have to think of ways, A, that we can draw those people back into our communities, but B, we have to think about how do we get young people excited about pursuing careers in medicine or pursuing careers in the industries we know that we need here. And that starts with STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math in elementary school. That starts with making sure that we create specific scholarship programs that support our young people from our area to go to medical school. It starts with really investing in young people to make sure that we have that base in the long term. And I don't know, that's a little bit of what I think about that. I think there's a lot of different ways to tackle it, but I think it's a really, really important issue.
A couple of years ago, they passed a budget where there were some cuts, and they cut, I believe Republicans controlled both houses at the time, cut about $15 billion from Health and Human Services, and that gutted the pandemic response program. When I look at budget priorities, and when I look at the choices that we make at the federal level, cutting that $15 billion had consequences, had real world consequences. What would some of your budget priorities be? I believe our current representative voted for that cut.
The bill that you're talking about it was S1379. It was a pandemic and all hazards preparedness act. The version that passed the House did not include the increased funding that the House Democrats asked for, but it was a voice vote. It wasn't a roll call vote. So LaMalfa does not have a specific vote on the record for that. So, but you're right, what passed in a Republican majority House was one that did not have the increased funding that the House Dems were asking for, which obviously was needed to prepare us for this unprecedented time that we're living in right now. But when we're speaking just generally about what my funding priorities would be, I will always be focused on domestic priorities that make people's lives better, right? Making sure that people can get their basic needs met. So we're talking about healthcare, we're talking about education, we're talking about, for us in this region, we're talking about natural resource management, right? Making sure that our forests are in a healthy condition so they don't present as much of a wildfire threat to our communities. Making sure that we are able to stimulate the local economy by doing that important work. I think that there's a lot of government waste that I think that we can try to trim out of the budget. There's a lot of things that the federal government can learn from private business, right? If the federal government had even a fifth of the entrepreneurialism and the innovation mindset that the private sector has, it would be so much more efficient. And for example, like just to kind of display what I'm talking about, say let's take Whiskeytown National Park, right up by where you live. They get a certain budget every year, but before that money gets to them, Congress says, here's the amount of money you get. Department of Interior goes to the Department of Interior, right? Then it goes to the National Park System. Then it goes to the Western region. Then it goes to California. Then it goes to Whiskeytown, right? Every single time that money goes to a different step, some of it is taken out, right? For processing. If there was a way, I mean, it's 2020. It should not cost that much. We have automatic bank transfers. If there was a way to simplify that, to streamline that, to make sure the money gets where it needs to be, that would be amazing, right? So besides looking at waste and trying to find efficiencies, we spend more, our defense budget, we spend more on our military than what is it, like the 6 countries below us combined. Don't quote me on that. I can't remember the exact number, but we
do spend a large amount on military spending, yes.
Far and away the most in the world. And so just making sure, like, obviously we need a strong national defense system, and national security is critically important, but domestic security is as well. and making sure that every single American has opportunity to be healthy, to get a good education that prepares them for their future, and to be able to live in safe communities where there is opportunity to get a job. This is the kind of things that I believe that the federal government should be prioritizing their spending on.
I've heard a little bit that the post office has been having trouble as a result of this crisis. Are you aware of that, or do you know what's going on?
I saw a Washington Post thing come through right before we hopped on the phone. Besides just the jobs, right? The Postal Service, especially in our remote rural communities, is a vital part of the community infrastructure, right? Like go to outskirts of Sierra County. A lot of places you don't have an actual mailing address, right? So you have to go to the post office to get your mail. That is how you have mail service delivery, right? I think that we need to be looking into and expanding, creating the opportunity for postal banking, especially in our rural communities, where post office can actually do things like cash checks and provide some of those basic banking services for folks, which they desperately need, because almost regardless of how remote you are, there is a post office somewhere near you. Like the ranch that I grew up on, it was 30-minute drive from the closest place to buy eggs, but dang it, the post office was only 6 miles away, right? And so I just really believe in our remote rural areas that the postal system is a crucial part of our community infrastructure, and that the GOP administration is going to find any
excuse
to try to dismantle it, and to try to not have to pay the pensions of the people who work there.
I know that states and local communities are definitely hurting. I know I've heard that roads and bridges, that because people aren't driving as much, they're not getting as much in from the gas tax. So they're not going to be able to do as many repairs to roads and bridges as they had planned. Should the federal government be helping state and local communities get through this difficult time?
The gas tax, I like to call it SB1, Senate Bill 1, has been critical for repairing our failing infrastructure, especially in rural parts. There are 1,600 bridges or overpasses in the state of California that are not deemed safe, right? But we're still driving on them every day, right? In our rural parts of California, we have the most dangerous rural roads in the country out here, right? While I was traveling for work before I was stuck in my lovely home forever, every week or every 2 weeks, I drive from Chico to the Sacramento airport, and I drive right by the congressman's house. I always wave, but I drive right by the congressman's house, and he lives on the section of 99, the Highway 99 that we call Blood Alley, right? Right outside his front door is Blood Alley. Is the most dangerous section of the road in the North State, where people consistently are killed in vehicle accidents. And so making sure that our state government has the funds through SB1 to repair those roads is absolutely key. And then the local economic boost that brings, that using those funds to repair our infrastructure in our district brings, is incredible. There's a reason that the Operating Engineers 3, OE3, their union, supported making sure that SB1 came through. And that's because all the people in that union who live in our community now have jobs in our community that bring tax dollars back to our communities, right? So besides public safety, increasing and taking care of our infrastructure is so important for the economic health of our communities. And we're already, 7 of our 11 counties are in the 15 poorest counties in the state of California. Like, California might be doing well as a whole, but we are not doing well up here. And so we always need to have the mind, before the pandemic, we always needed to have the mind of the economic outlook, the economic lens. But now in this new era that we're living in, it's even more important. And so the second part of your question was about
Yes.
McConnell and deciding that we weren't going to pay pensions anymore. Say that part again.
He specifically said that states should look at filing bankruptcy, and that might be a better way for them to deal with their pension problems that they're currently having. And I know statewide we've got like Cal Fire, we've got the California Highway Patrol. That seems to be the Republican solution. And since
you ready for me to get mad again?
I know, not trying to get you too angry, but
no,
those are the people that he's going after. And, you know, he said there's no Republican desire for those things. So I assume that includes our current representative has no desire to try to save those programs.
So let's just hone in for a second on our firefighters, right? Our firefighters can work generally until they're 55, maybe. It's such a physically demanding job. They're working until they're 50, they're 55, and then they have to retire. Our firefighters, who now, every time they get cancer, we presume, which is higher than normal, every time they get cancer, we presume it is an on-the-job related injury because of all of the hazards that they're breathing in every day to save our lives, right? They have higher issues, high suicide rates, high mental health rates of mental health issues, including PTSD, and they are doing these physically demanding jobs all day, every day to care for us, right? Time spent away from their family. Folks who work at CAL FIRE are like 3 days on, 4 days off with their families, but they're working sometimes 5,900 hours in a fire season, gone for 44 days at a time away from their families. And the thought that these selfless public servants have been working their whole life to earn a pension, so when they physically cannot do their job anymore, they can retire in dignity and take care of their families that, by the way, they haven't gotten to spend most of their career with, is infuriating. And it points. And that, I mean, we haven't even gotten to CHP, we haven't even gotten to teachers, but the fact that Republican leadership in the House is so disconnected from the realities of normal people that they would say, forget the firefighters pension, forget highway patrol pension, forget teacher pension. These are people who are public servants who are working every single day for not a lot of money. CAL FIRE folks don't get paid extraordinary amounts of money, with the hope, with the knowledge that they're going to get to retire in dignity, and they're going to get to take care of their families. And I was a registered Republican for 10 years. And I grew up on a conservative family farm. I had a lot of conservative values. I still carry some of those today. But the fact that the Republican Party now is the party that's saying, no, we're not gonna take care of firefighters and highway patrol anymore. Like, we're not gonna give them their pension. That alone should be enough for every single person in this district, regardless of who you are, to not vote for the status quo, to not vote for what we have.
You know, I don't know if people's values particularly change, but I know certainly the parties that represent those values seem to be changing.
Yeah.
And the party now that is willing to uphold promises is not the Republican Party. And Mitch McConnell's idea that, hey, just declare bankruptcy and get out of your pension problems, and use your pension money to pay for all these other things. I don't know, man. That's not very honest. That's not very honorable. That certainly doesn't resonate with any of my values.
Yeah. There's still the Republican Party, the leadership in Washington, D.C., which is what, when I speak of the Republican Party, I always try to speak of the leadership in Washington, D.C., because the Republicans that live in my district are good, hardworking people, right? It's the leadership in DC is so corrupt that they are so far away from the traditional conservative values. Like, when I was growing up, like, my dad was like, I'm a conservative because we care about conserving the environment. We grew up on the land. We want to steward the land. We want to conserve our natural resources. I'm a conservative voter because I want to be fiscally responsible. You know, I want to make sure that you're taken care of, that Social Security is taken care of. Like, these were the values that I grew up with.
Yeah.
And so now to see the leadership of the GOP say, we're not going to conserve the environment. Let's strip down all the trees. Let's mine. Let's drill everywhere. Forget the future. Forget future generations. We want what we want now, and what we want is profits, right? To have the GOP, leadership of the GOP say, oh, with this tax cut, we're going to give 83% of this tax cut to corporations and the wealthiest among us, right? We're going to give away $2 trillion to those folks. Like, nothing about that is fiscally conservative, right? The leadership, the GOP leadership in DC has completely lost the values that they believe to hold, that they should believe to hold true, that are the values of the Republicans in my district, right? This is a pretty relaxed format because I'm in my house. So I feel like I get to go on tangents.
So thank you all for listening. If you want to hear a little more, we'll have a third part coming up. So thank you so much for your time. And that's it for this segment. Thank you.